Welcome to the Life Sounds Good podcast. I'm Mike.
And I'm Wendy. And we're here today with April Corner, an absolutely wonderful wife, mother, and social media personality who was diagnosed with hearing loss at the age of 25. Welcome to the podcast, April.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
It's great to have somebody in the younger demographic who can talk about what having hearing loss is like. People get so stuck in the idea that hearing loss is only for old people. And the reality is that people of any age can have hearing loss. So tell us a little bit about what your experience was prior to your diagnosis. How did life sort of change that made you go seeking some information?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was kind of interesting. I was so naive to the thought that I could have hearing loss because I was 25. But I noticed that I was struggling to hear on one side. And it was the middle of the summer. I was like, I've been swimming lots. It's just water in my ear. Did not think it could be hearing loss at all. Went on, throughout the summer. And then around September, I was like, you know what? I feel like I should just go to my doctor and see if they can help me, get the water out of my ear. Then they were like, you know what, we see something. We're going to send you to a specialist. Still, hearing loss was the last thing on my mind. I was like, sure, yeah, let me go to a ENT and audiologist. Let's see what's going on. About a month later, so it was October 16th, 2016, I went for my very first hearing test ever. And after that was complete, the ENT came in to speak with me and he said, so you have otosclerosis and you will need a hearing aid. And I remember immediately welling up, like my eyes were filled with tears. And I'm sitting there because I'm by myself, not expecting a hearing loss diagnosis. I was just like, I need to get my ears cleaned. Totally fine. And it was very overwhelming. I'm not sure I heard anything else he said after the fact that I needed a hearing aid. I left the appointment bawling my eyes out, immediately called my parents, and was just very overwhelmed. It's a very overwhelming process when you learn something like that you were really not expecting. And I'm very grateful for my parents because there's no way I would have been able to afford a hearing aid on my own. And their support really helped me transition. And I had just started dating my now husband at the time as well. And I was so worried about his reaction, and his immediate support also, I think, was a big reason why, my hearing loss journey has become what it is from all of my support from my friends and family.
Wow, that would have been a lot to deal with at the age of 25. There's not, a lot of pounds of life experience by the time you're 25 for most people. So that would have been interesting. So is your hearing loss just one-sided?
No. So it was to begin with. And that's where I got away with, I would say, faking it through a lot of conversations, because it started on my left side and my right side was still considered normal. But there were signs that otosclerosis was there, but it was mild enough that it was, I didn't need a hearing aid. So for the first about 4 years, it was just one side. And then end of 2019, I started to notice that I was struggling more and more, even with wearing the one hearing aid. But before I get more into that, I was so stubborn to wear my hearing aid when I first got it because I could still hear out of my one ear. And I worked with dogs at the time, so I convinced myself, I don't need to amplify dogs barking. Why would I wear my hearing aid? I'm fine. I don't need this. I'll wear it when I need to. And then it got to a point where I was like, oh, I need to wear this. I need that assistance. And that was a new kind of struggle because I had my hearing aid for a few years, but I wasn't wearing it consistently. And then when it got to the point where I needed to wear it consistently, my other ear caught up. And so I had to get a second hearing aid. And that was right at the beginning of 2020, just before, actually, it was kind of in the middle of everything. My regular audiologist at the time wouldn't see people. So I had to find someone willing to, take me in to do a hearing test because most of the world was shut down. And yeah, it was a lot getting my second hearing aid when masks were introduced. It was overwhelming, which kind of made me realize I needed to share my story and I needed to share about my hearing loss to help ease my own anxiety and stress of it all. So now I'm bilateral otosclerosis. I wear hearing aids in both ears. I'm sorry, that was a very lengthy all around answer, but yeah.
No, but a comprehensive answer is always valued. I'm sure that your specialist explained it to you, and no doubt you dove into Dr. Google to learn some more. So what can you tell us about otosclerosis?
Yeah, so it's an abnormal bone growth in the ear, and there is a surgery that you can get to potentially correct the hearing loss. However, there's a lot of risks with that, and personally, the risks don't outweigh the potential reward of having my hearing restored, and hearing aids have worked well enough for me that I'm okay with relying on hearing aids. There might be a point down the line where I do want to get a stapenectomy, which is what the type of surgery is called. But with that surgery, I could get permanent vertigo, tinnitus. I could go completely deaf, and hearing aids wouldn't help me at all. So there are a lot of success stories with stapenectomies, but there's also a lot of stories where they work and then years later they no longer work. And I've come such a far way to accept my hearing aids that they're kind of a part of me now. They're, the first thing I put in the morning, and it's just part of my routine. It's part of me, and I'm okay with that. But maybe when I'm older and my hearing aids aren't really helping anymore, I could explore the surgery. But right now I'm okay with what my life looks like without it.
Oh, that's a great statement that you're good with how your life is. That's wonderful. Hey, Mike, what do you think your reaction would have been at the age of 25, learning that you had hearing loss?
Oh, I think there'd be a whole lot more denial than you went through. I think that there would have been a lot more fighting and a lot more struggle to even accept that initial diagnosis. I don't know whether it's because I'm a man or just because of my personality. But that would have been, I get the heavy hit, but I really feel like that would have been very hard for me anyway, just to accept at all. So the fact that you had the strength to, even though it probably felt like very little strength, but that you had the strength to go to your family and get that support system to start that process and accept that that's the reality of your situation. Like, that's amazing. Because I don't think that I could have taken it on that quickly. I think there would have been some time where I was actually causing more damage because I just didn't want to accept that. And now at the age I'm at now, that would have been a very different situation. But at 25, oh my God, what a hit.
Yeah, it was, honestly, it took probably 4 years to really accept it. Like, there was a huge grieving process before I got to that acceptance stage. And I think by starting my channel, that is really what allowed me to be like, there's really nothing wrong with this. Like, why is there so much stigma around it? And I really truly believe God gave me hearing loss to help other people, because that's whenever someone asked me what I wanted to do with my life, it would always be like, I want to help people in some way, but I never landed on that direction. And then when I got my hearing loss, I was like, no, this is my purpose now. Like, I am here to help others with their hearing loss journey. And as much as it's a struggle, and not to say I don't still have bad days. I do. I still have many bad days, and every human does, it's not just isolated to hearing loss. And I think that's the biggest thing is with life, you have to go through those ups and downs, and hearing loss just adds a unique twist to it. But that's what it is.
That's actually amazing that's how you chose to look at it. To look at it as a blessing that you can pass on to other people. That's phenomenal. And as well on that is just that you chose to create a voice and share your situation with others, and that it was a mutual benefit there, that it sounds like others helped you through just as much as you're helping them by sharing your story.
Absolutely. And like you had mentioned before, it is kind of seen more as an older person issue. And that's where I found online lacked the resources for, the age 40 and under. And again, that's one of the driving factors is like, there's so many people my age, but there's not really a platform yet where we can feel comfortable to vocalize it, because it's usually seen as 60 plus, and it's hard to connect with. As much as you understand and you empathize with other people with hearing loss, the age difference can add that more difficult factor to really feel heard and seen because of different life stage
Absolutely.
attributes to what's going on.
Absolutely. You're entering into your life. They're at the stage of approaching retirement. That's a big difference to have a disability come out at the beginning of your journey versus at the end of your journey.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just having my daughter too with my hearing loss, like that was a big worry as well. And the other thing with otosclerosis, like pregnancy can make it worse. And so when I found out I was pregnant, I immediately got a hearing test so that we could see if my pregnancy changed it at all. And thankfully it hasn't affected it in any way, which is wonderful. But that is where often people my age notice otosclerosis, is when they do get pregnant and have a child, is when that can kick in for some people.
That's a really good step that you took there, actually, as well, is recognizing that something was potentially going to change your situation. So you went and got a baseline. Like anybody, I mean, whether you have hearing loss or you don't have hearing loss, to go in and get a test just to get that baseline so that when something does change, you have that measure. That was a brilliant move on your part.
Yeah. And I think that's the biggest thing I've learned now that I have hearing loss, is how hearing health is not really promoted in your regular health journey, call it. And that's another reason with my channel is I'm just like, hey, even if you're not having any signs of hearing loss, just go and learn about your hearing health, because it's connected to brain health, it's connected to your balance, and it's connected to all these things. And those issues you're having that aren't signs of hearing loss could be associated with your ears.
And that's one of the things that we try to tackle here, is just, even in the direction of our communications publicly, rather than looking at hearing aids as a lifestyle product, we look at it as a piece of technology for your health, because your hearing, it's all interconnected, as you say. So that's where we sort of land on that, is we agree with that. And that's how we think it should be talked about and discussed.
Agreed. Absolutely. That's the difference between it being, hearing your grandchildren or hearing the wind or whatever, and really diving into all the other health impacts, the dementia risk increase, the serious fall increase, even particularly for older folks, the increased use of hospitals. And you can kind of see that connection, because dementia can cause hospital stays, falls can cause hospital stay, depression can cause. So there's all of these associations. So getting it to stop being what is sometimes referred to as an invisible disability. I've heard people talk about, if you're blind, kind of everybody knows you're blind, and people make the proper concessions for you to be able to maneuver in your world. There's lots of supports there. But with hearing loss, it's considered they're just getting old. So, is it worth treating it and that kind of thing? And that's not the reality. So, April, what were the hardest things for you once you had your hearing aids? How did the world around you react to your hearing loss?
That's a really good question. And to be honest, I am probably one of the few who can say my family, extended family, was immediately supportive. And I know that's not the case for a lot of people. So I try to make sure I'm delicate with, expressing how lucky I am, because it's not the case for most. And again, that's why I started my channel, to be that for people who don't have that. But the hardest, honestly, I think just getting over the stigma of people judging me. That was, and I know that's not directly correlated with my hearing loss in the sense of what I struggled with, what I couldn't hear, but that was one of the biggest hurdles, was just dealing with other people's judgment. And once I was finally able to let that go, my goodness, did it feel like a weight lifted off my shoulder. And I don't care anymore. I care what people think of me in a, appropriate way, but I don't let that hold any power over me. And if they want to judge me, that says more about them than it does about me. And once I was able to kind of shift my mindset to that, I was like, oh my Lord, this is just so much better. My days are better, they're easier. And it's just, again, that wasn't overnight. That took a few years to get to that point, but that was one of the hardest things to deal with in the moment and now let go of that power. And yeah, that was amazing. And then another thing was when I got my second hearing aid, it was just kind of re-going through that grieving process in a way that, okay, now both years, I can no longer really fake it through conversations and such because I need to rely on my hearing aids now. But again, I think that just comes with time and acceptance to be able to let those worries go. Not to say that they're not completely gone, but it's a lot easier to manage and to handle.
Do you think your hearing loss has held you back at all?
No, honestly, no. If anything, it's driven me more to show people that it doesn't hold me back. When I was first diagnosed, I, like previously mentioned, I worked with animals, so it didn't really hold me back in that place of work. And then when I changed careers and I focused more towards marketing, it was a remote job. So I was very blessed to kind of be on chat or email and not really have to worry about phones. So again, that was very unique. I'm very fortunate to have that. So in terms of that, it didn't hold me back. But anytime I saw a hurdle, I would just be like, well, I need to prove to myself that there's no, this won't hold me back. I just have to find a new way around it to make whatever situation it is work, whether it be immediately tell people that I have hearing loss so they can adapt. Like with my daughter's swimming classes, I obviously can't wear my hearing aids in. So I just make a point to tell the instructor, hey, you need to get a hold of me, tap me on the shoulder, look me in the face kind of thing. Advocacy has come a long way too for myself. And that's where, I try not to let it hold me back if there's ever a situation where I might feel that, but I can't say I have like many, many examples because I just try not to let it hold me back.
So you just mentioned going to swimming class and asking the instructor, tap me on the shoulder, look me in the eye. Do you think from your experience in conversations that there are lots of folks with hearing loss who know that that is an appropriate behavior, that you have to advocate for yourself? Or do you think that little nugget might be missing?
I would say yes and no. I think advocacy is a huge part of the acceptance process because a lot of people don't want to disclose that they have it. And so they're willing to just figure out those little ways to make sure that they can follow enough of conversations without having to say, like, face me, do this, do that, which is hard. I can't imagine. That's a struggle. And so I will say, yes, a lot of people know that they need to do that and they will do that, but it's not simple for everyone, especially if you don't have the personality for it. And I do say personality for it because it's not always easy talking about yourself either, or like asking for your needs. Like the example I give that I find really funny, like when I go get my nails done, I struggle so hard to tell them, like, no, I don't like that color that I picked or that shape. And why is it so hard to speak up for ourselves when it's the thing that's impacting us, not them? Like, I don't think they care what color of nail polish I get, right? So why am I so worried about asking or speaking up for what I need? And I just laugh to myself, like, yeah, like, why can't we just say our needs? And if they aren't willing to accommodate us, then again, it shows a lot more about them than it does about us. And it's one of those things that people with hearing loss, I think, will eventually get to and realize, that's a major thing I need to focus on is advocating for myself. But it's hard. It's hard.
Well, it's exposing yourself, right? As soon as you start that conversation, inside of you that you're about to expose something personal to potentially someone who's pretty much a stranger to your personal life, if it's a professional or if it's just somebody you're working with or somebody in public. That's difficult for a lot of people to lift that veil to feel exposed. And you have to trust. You have to have that trust, or hope for that trust that you're going to get the reaction that you want. Because if the person reacts negatively, I'm sure that there's also that fear there in exposing yourself that how are they going to react? Is this going to be a problem? Are they going to look at me differently? So I can absolutely get and identify why that is not as easy as it is done as it is said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So tell me about what was going through your head when you decided to become a voice for young people with, or younger people with hearing loss in the great scary world of the internet.
Well, I initially wanted to tell the world about my hearing loss because it was April 2020 and I was struggling with the masks, and I realized I really can't hide behind this anymore. And I really don't want to have to tell everyone in my life individually. I just want to rip the Band-Aid off. And so I made a Facebook post and I told all of the world, my world on Facebook, about my hearing loss. And I was just shocked at all of the stories of people who I knew who had hearing loss that I didn't know about. And it was the first step in my acceptance journey. And I was like, wow, this wasn't as bad as I had thought it up in my head to be. People aren't as bad as, we think that they are, or as judgmental as they are. Of course, there are those people out there, but the world can surprise us sometimes. And that was the first step in realizing, wow, there's a lot of people out there like me, and sharing my story has encouraged them to talk about their hearing loss, and there's something here. And that summer, I wrote a children's book as a passion project because there wasn't much to do. And I released it in September of that year, so September 2020. And I was just blown away by how much these conversations were needed. And then a year later, I was like, you know what? I'm going to dive into starting a channel, sharing more about my day-to-day, sharing more about what it's like to have hearing loss. And it blossomed. And I never wanted to, I still don't want to be an influencer or anything like that. I genuinely just want to share what it's like to have hearing loss. And of course, my hearing loss journey is completely different than the next person because we're all unique. But there's a lot of similarities, and there's a lot of shared experiences that people realize, hey, I'm not alone. This is so cool to hear. This person's, in her 30s now, but it's just nice to see someone living their life and being happy and have found happiness and not letting it hold me back. And I'm married, I have a daughter, like all of these things. And it's just, I want people to be optimistic and see that as much as hearing loss, yeah, it's not a diagnosis I think anyone wants. It's something that, it doesn't have to hold you back, and you can still live a beautiful life.
That is so nicely said.
Thank you.
So you wrote a post on LinkedIn about using the language hearing impaired. And I read it and I thought, yeah, boy, does she ever have a point? Because even in the industry of hearing aids and hearing testing, you don't see the language hearing impaired very often. You hear hearing loss, it's like very soft. And it made me start thinking, is that the right language? Hearing loss, even, because the idea of loss might be adding to some of the negativity. But in the piece that you wrote, you talked about the need to cut to the chase and use language like hearing impaired. So what prompted you to write that? And, sort of share a little wee synopsis, if you can, about what you wrote.
Yeah. So when I was first diagnosed, I would say hard of hearing, and most people would be like, what? And it wouldn't roll off my tongue very easily. And then I'd have to go into an explanation. And I didn't feel like it packed enough punch to get people to really understand. No, I'm hearing impaired. My hearing is impaired. And so I just started using that language personally. And I asked people on my channel, like, how do you prefer to identify as yourself? And people got so mad at me for saying hearing impaired. And so I was like, there's something here that we need to talk about more within the community, not necessarily hearing people using it, but people with hearing loss using it. And I just find that these conversations are so important to have to reduce the stigma. And words are so powerful. And I'm a big believer in actions speak louder than words. So words are words. If they trigger us or affect us, we need to do some internal digging as to why. And that's what kind of sparked the post is like, if you have an issue with that word, have you fully accepted your hearing loss? Have you fully accepted what's going on? And not to, attack anyone or point fingers. It's just, I'm just asking people to kind of do that internal digging, because I find hearing impaired uses enough emphasis and people are like, oh, hearing impaired, like visually impaired. There's no issues saying visually impaired. And I began to lose my hearing at 25. So my hearing is impaired. So how is that wrong to say when it's the truth? And you can describe yourself however you would like. I just feel like we shouldn't discourage people from using those words, because then people might begin to understand it more, begin to understand hearing loss more. And, deaf is too strong for my type of hearing loss. And hard of hearing, it just does, those words just don't in my brain, like, I don't know, make sense to me. But hearing impaired is what just feels the most perfect to my journey. And I find that stigma stems sometimes from the community itself, because we don't want to accept certain things. And I know there can be a lot of controversy within the hearing loss community about that, but I've just have shifted my perspective so much in ways that I didn't even know I could handle in my own journey. But I just find words so powerful, and I don't think we should be afraid of them, afraid of the truth.
Well, that's a really good way to put it, though, to not be afraid of the truth, because the truth is that there is an impairment. You need to use technology to get over it, and you need the people around you support to communicate fully, right? If for example, if you're swimming and you need to be tapped on the shoulder, that's an impairment. It's not that it's a little bit hard to hear you. I'm not gonna. And I think that you're right. I think that there's a lot to be said about what people have going on inside themselves and on their own journeys and their experiences as to how they feel about terminology and words like that, because it strikes them. And it challenges them, because they think, like you said, you went through the phase of I'm dealing just fine. They may be at that stage in their journey. So the word impairment is a strong, strong word for them. Right. So I can see it on both sides, but I think that you taking that step to try and ask those questions within your community, and to publicize that type of thinking on LinkedIn, I think that those are all just wonderful movements, wonderful actions, right? As we said, actions speak louder than the words.
So, April, do you think that you would be this wise a human being at the early 30s years of age if you hadn't gone through this?
I don't think I would. I think I was put on this path for a reason, and it's just, it's been a beautiful journey, ups and downs, and it's hard to say, but I'm a firm believer in everything happens for a reason. And if you'd asked me 6-7 years ago if I would be where I am today, I probably would have laughed in your face and been like, no. And I still wouldn't have been wearing my hearing aid regularly at the time either. So no, I don't think I would have been.
And sometimes things fall into our lap because we need to grow. And it's, sometimes that's what happens. So you're active on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. You have your own website.
And YouTube.
And YouTube, right? Exactly. So if somebody's looking for you, where will they find you? Give me some handles that they can look at.
So my handle online is Hard to Hear It, and Hard to Hear It, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn is April Corner. And then I recently launched in September my website, Hard to Hear It, where I feature different deaf and hard of hearing brands and coaches and other services where we can kind of collaborate all of our resources into one place. So that's growing, as people want to join, because again, I found that there was a gap in the market for the younger generation, and I wanted to create a cool space where they can come and see, like, hearing loss isn't for older people. It's for everyone. Hearing loss does not discriminate. And that is where people can find me. And I also, earlier this year, launched a course / workshop called Shifting Your Mindset, Learning to Enjoy Your Hearing Loss. And it's a 30-minute workshop, if you will, where people can just learn different ways that have helped me to become how confident I am with my hearing loss. And I'm going to continue to try and figure out ways I can help people. And I have a shirt that says hearing aids are cool that I sell as well. And when I wear it, it turns heads, and I want people to stop me and ask me about my hearing aids. I know that's not for everyone, and that's totally fine, but I'm in a place where I can accept, those looks and accept those questions and get people to be curious, because I find curiosity is one of those things that can help end stigma in all aspects of life. If we don't let people ask questions, even if they're well-intended or not, what are we saying to them? We don't want you to talk about hearing loss. We don't want you to ask questions. And I think that adds to the stigma as well. So again, not for everyone, but that's what my channel is for, to have those people message me, comment, whatever, and I can direct them accordingly based on what they want to know.
Is it a good and happy life, April?
Yeah, I love my life. And my daughter growing up with a mom with hearing loss is a unique experience for her, and hopefully she'll grow up very compassionate and help others when she gets older too, of children with parents with hearing loss. And there's nothing that I can say I would change. And my hearing loss, I was given my hearing loss for a reason. And as much as, like I've said before, there's ups and downs and I can still have a bad day, my hearing aids have brought me back to my life. And without them, if I'm not wearing them, that's a different story, but I like wearing them. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with them.
How does the world sound when you don't wear them?
I tried to describe this to my husband the other day. And so our TV has like a mute and a soft mute. And I would say life without hearing aids is like the soft mute level. So I can hear stuff, but I don't necessarily know what it is that I'm hearing or the direction that it's coming from. And if I'm in a perfectly, small room with no extra background noise, I could probably make out a conversation, but it would have to be a pretty, kind of going back to your original question though, about a hard thing. One of the things coming to mind now is that I had to deal with was my brain knows what things should sound like. And sometimes hearing aids can make it sound artificial. As much as it's great to be able to, hear that back, sometimes I'm like, it's not what I remember, that hearing, like, that's strange. I'm grateful to be able to hear it, but it's different.
Do you find that with music?
Yeah, music, I prefer to listen to the things that I knew before I had hearing loss. Some of the newer stuff, it's hard for me to get into because I can't really sing along. But that's okay. And with the hearing loss, it's really easy to get overstimulated sometimes. And so I have a different, perspective on music now, at least how my journey is going. Music's a little different. But it's one of those things, like, you kind of learn as you go what you like now and what you don't like when it comes to hearing loss. And that's okay. Again, it's a part of life. You kind of go through liking things, not liking things, with or without hearing loss.
You wrote at one point that one of the great things about having hearing aids is being able to take them out at night and you can sleep better.
Yeah. I mean, now that I have a daughter, it's a little different, but it is
Agreed.
Still great to be able to just turn off the world and just not have any distractions. Like, oh, the tap dripping, that's not going to bother me. It's great. Like, it's not, it's those little things that you might not realize you need or don't need. And there are some silver linings, absolutely. And you just got to figure out what those are for you.
I'm curious. I just wanted to circle back for a moment, if it's okay. You had mentioned that during COVID, that when things were a little frustrating and dealing with masks, that you had written a children's book.
Yeah. So it was something always kind of on the back of my mind, wanting to discuss, my hearing loss journey. And so the book's called What's Your Superpower? And I just want to encourage children not to be afraid to ask questions and not to be afraid to embrace their superpower. And it goes through different disabilities. And it's a little boy asking, what's that behind your ears? And the little girl goes, oh, these are my hearing aids. They're my superpower. They help me to hear. And there's another example of another child walking with a cane. And why do you use that to walk? And it's, oh, this is my superpower. And it's just encouraging a conversation between parents and kids about how to, respect people with disabilities and to not see those assistive devices as a negative thing. They're your superpower. They, help you live a full life. And there's coloring pages in the back too. It's just really fun. And that's the biggest thing is I want to encourage conversations to be had so that we're not afraid to talk about hearing loss or whatever disability you have, because we feel more connected that way. At least that's how I feel. And that's available on Amazon, but you can also find it through my website.
So in closing, if you had only one thing that you could share with the world, what would that be?
Oh, I honestly would say is that hearing aids are really cool and we need to change our perspective on them. They are incredible little pieces of technology, and I like to call them premium earbuds because they do way more for you than just play music in your ears. And they're custom to you. There's Bluetooth, there's all these incredible things. There's settings that can notify, my hearing aids can notify people if I've fallen. Like, they're just powerful, incredible tools. And we just need to shift our perspective on them, that they just do more than, help us hear. They bring us back to conversations and things like that. And I hope that people can see how incredible these pieces of technology are, and hearing aids are cool. That's what I like to push, is that they're super cool.
That's an awesome ending comment, April. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking the time to come and visit us at Life Sounds Good. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us on the Life Sounds Good podcast. As always, I'm Mike.
And I'm Wendy. Thanks for joining us. And don't forget, you can find the Life Sounds Good podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And check us out on social media. Thanks for joining me again today, Mike.
Always a pleasure, Wendy. And remember, life sounds good.